Writing. The restaurant was glowing beneath the bright afternoon sun when a wealthy woman pushed a sealed envelope across the table and laughed at the black single father standing beside her chair. "I'll pay you $1 million if you can read what's inside," she mocked, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. But the moment the man looked at the handwriting on that envelope, the color drained from his face. He didn't reach for the money. He didn't even look at the billionaire. Instead, he whispered a sentence so quietly that the entire room went silent, because nobody expected a humble maintenance worker to know the one secret that powerful woman had spent 15 years trying to bury. Before we uncover what was inside that letter, if you believe kindness can change a life and everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. It was a warm Tuesday afternoon in Chicago, and sunlight poured through the enormous glass windows of the elegant Meridian house, turning the polished floors golden. At a corner table sat Violetta Ashbourne, a billionaire entrepreneur whose name appeared on buildings, magazines, and business channels across the country. She was surrounded by executives discussing a major charity foundation she planned to launch, but her attention suddenly shifted toward a man walking through the dining room carrying a toolbox. His name was Kendrick Vale, a 38-year-old maintenance technician who had been working at the hotel for nearly 6 years. He wore a clean but faded navy work uniform, worn boots, and the tired expression of a father who had spent more time worrying about bills than sleeping. Kendrick was a single father raising his 8-year-old daughter, Amara, after losing his wife several years earlier. He never talked about the tragedy at work. He simply worked, went home, cooked dinner, helped his daughter with homework, and tried to make sure she never noticed how often he quietly skipped meals so she could have enough. That afternoon, Kendrick had been called to repair a malfunctioning air conditioning unit near Violetta's private dining area. While he worked, one of the executives complained about the hotel staff being too slow. Violetta glanced at Kendrick and made a cruel remark about how people like him should be grateful just to work in a place where wealthy people ate. A few guests looked uncomfortable, but nobody challenged her. Kendrick simply lowered his eyes and continued repairing the machine. He had learned long ago that dignity sometimes meant refusing to become the person someone else wanted you to be. But then Violetta noticed the old envelope sticking slightly out of Kendrick's toolbox. She asked what it was, and Kendrick instinctively covered it with his hand. He explained that it was a letter he had found behind a loose panel while repairing an old storage cabinet. The envelope had been sealed for years and carried a name he recognized but could not explain. Violetta suddenly became interested. She demanded to see it, but Kendrick refused because he had promised himself he would deliver it to the person named on the front. Violetta laughed, reached into her designer handbag, and placed a stack of documents on the table. She told him that people like him could spend a lifetime earning what she made before breakfast, then offered the outrageous challenge that would soon be repeated across the entire restaurant. She would pay him $1 million to read the letter aloud. Everyone expected Kendrick to accept. Instead, he stared at the envelope as though it contained something far more valuable than money. Then he slowly opened it. The paper inside was yellow with age, and the handwriting was unmistakably personal. Kendrick read the first few lines silently, and his hands began to tremble. The letter had been written by a man named Solomon Ashbourne, Violetta's father. Kendrick had never met him, but the words described a secret that connected their lives. Solomon had apparently discovered years earlier that his daughter was involved in a dangerous financial scheme that could destroy innocent families. Before he could expose her, he became seriously ill. The letter explained that he had entrusted a portion of his personal fortune to a struggling young employee named Marcus Vale, Kendrick's father, because Marcus had protected Solomon during the darkest period of his life. Solomon had promised that the money would eventually be used to help families who had been forgotten by the wealthy world. But after Solomon died, the money disappeared, and Marcus was blamed for stealing it. Kendrick's father spent the rest of his life carrying the shame, even though he had never taken a cent. Kendrick looked up at Violetta, and for the first time, the billionaire woman looked frightened. The room remained completely silent. She tried to dismiss the letter as a forgery, but Kendrick turned the page over and revealed a second handwritten note. It contained a location, a date, and a sentence that froze everyone in the room. Solomon had hidden proof of everything inside the Foundation's original records, and only Marcus Vale had known where to find them. Kendrick suddenly understood why his father had spent his final years telling him never to hate rich people, never to judge someone by their clothes, and never to let bitterness steal his heart. Then Kendrick did something nobody expected. He folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. He told Violetta that he didn't want her $1 million. He said his father had died believing the world would eventually discover the truth, and Kendrick had spent years wondering why his father had never fought harder to clear his name. Now he understood. His father had possessed evidence that could have destroyed the Ashbourne family, but he chose silence because Solomon had asked him to protect Violetta's children from the consequences of their mother's actions. Kendrick's reply was simple but devastating. He said that his father had protected her family when they had done nothing to protect his. Violetta's confidence collapsed. She finally admitted that her father had discovered the truth before his death and that she had spent years hiding the evidence because she was terrified of losing everything. She expected Kendrick to expose her publicly, but instead he asked one question: whether she was finally ready to make things right. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time in her life, money could not buy her way out of the moment. She promised to reopen the Foundation, restore Marcus Vale's name, and use her wealth to help families who had been destroyed by the same system that had made her rich. Months later, Kendrick was no longer repairing broken machines at the Meridian House. Violetta had offered him a position overseeing the Foundation's community projects, but he accepted only after making her promise that the organization would focus on ordinary families, struggling parents, children, and people who were usually invisible to wealthy society. The first project they funded was a housing program for single parents. Kendrick also created a scholarship in his father's name. Every afternoon, when he returned home, Amara would run into his arms, unaware that her father had quietly changed the future of hundreds of families. And Violetta changed too. She stopped measuring people by their clothes, their jobs, or their bank accounts. She learned that the most valuable person in a room might be the one everyone else had stopped noticing. Kendrick never accepted the $1 million she had offered that day. Instead, he asked her to donate it to the scholarship fund. When someone later asked him why he had refused such a fortune, he smiled and said that his father had taught him something money could never purchase: a person's worth is not determined by what they own, but by what they are willing to do when nobody is watching. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes people can change, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Your support helps stories like this reach someone who may desperately need to hear them. Before you leave, make this special promise in the comments: I will never judge someone by their appearance, because I don't know the battle they are fighting. Let those words be your commitment to kindness. And remember, sometimes the person standing quietly in the corner is carrying a story powerful enough to change an entire room. Kendrick walked into that restaurant carrying a toolbox and a sealed letter. He walked out carrying something much greater: the restored honor of his father, a brighter future for his daughter, and the proof that compassion can be worth more than $1 million.